Hey Jeff, how's it going?
Yeah, good, David. Good to finally talk in person. Well,
Yeah,
not quite in
likewise.
person,
So,
remotely in person.
yeah, it sounds like you've been busy. So, pretty exciting stuff. So apparently there's been some questions on how do you set up MQTT and Sparkplug B on various devices, and I think some of those where you use some function blocks. There's some that are just inherently in there, and what are the differences in some ways that different pieces of hardware communicate with that. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity just to take a look at what some of those are.
Yeah, that's great. And I appreciate you, David, answering some of my questions because I knew you had some experience with the EZRack PLC and some other PLCs. And so that just what kind of sparked my interest was the simulation mode of easy automation software. Unfortunately, it is somewhat limited. We found out. I was hoping that we could do MQTT in simulation modes, but apparently that's not a feature yet. So we'll have to.
The simulation mode is really geared more toward, is my code right? Because I mean, if you take a look at how the EZRack gets configured, it really is one of the easiest PLCs to configure in terms of ladder logic, and it has all the things that you would expect to find in a PLC, but it's super easy to draw some things out.
Yeah, a little bit of time I spent with it. The ladder logic is much easier and more intuitive. How you move things around. Sure.
But once you start getting into structured text, it starts to make some sense. Only because, especially if you do a lot of programming, that's where that starts to pay off. And we'll see a little bit of that on the Siemens. So, which is actually where we're going to start. That's what I brought up. So Siemens, the S7-1200s and the 1500s, they all take advantage of function blocks. And the guys over at Automation Station, they can actually walk you through how to get these types of things set up. But ultimately what you're into is you have to download a library that includes this cell MQTT client. So this is the actual function block. And once you have that, this block is now available for any of your projects that you have running on your particular PLC. There. So I've created, and you're going to see the exact same ladder logic all the way through. So it's just basically a motor starter where you can start and stop a motor, and I have it tied to a compressor. That's kind of the equipment that we're operating. And I can operate that in a local mode. I can operate that in remote mode. And then once I get all the way down here at the bottom, it's on either one of those modes. If I have this coil is true on either case and my E-stop's not hit, I'm going to turn the motor on and I'm going to run a pilot light. So I've also created a function block down here that's going to do some publishing for us as part of this same. So the way that this works is it'll just continue to cycle through and it'll start checking all the states. I did put in some error handling in here, my sixth network 6. That's just around some errors. So in case there's a problem, that's usually when things go wonky. That's built in. And then of course, I also built in some structured text as far as how do we actually control the device with it. So it's not like some of the others where you can just take tags and assign it and have it published. It's you have to programmatically go through and address that. So that's what I've done here. So when you first drag one of your function blocks out, the second thing you're going to want to do, of course, is it's now going to throw this database up here, or a data block. I'm sorry, that's what Siemens calls everything. It's a block. Then you're also going to have to create another data block, which is this MQTT. And that's where I have all of this configuration that's done in here. So you have to get in and address what all your parameters are. And this is where you're going to now identify, okay, am I using a fully qualified domain name? What's my hardware identifier? Again, the Automation Station video will walk through some of that. Connection ID, and then you have to set up your broker and that type of thing through here. Then, of course, are you using some passwords? So once you get down in here, you say, okay, for my TCP connection, yes, I am using a password. And of course, here's that username and password here. And I'm pretty clever. Don't tell Dan Rankinen I'm not using strong password in this case. It's something as clever as D Schultz 1. And that's just so I can keep track of that. So once you get that all set up, there's several other tags that you have to get created, or that you have to create. And of course, you'll notice that all of these tags that are in this data block are now signed over here. And I've already put that in.
Are you going to be using a broker? A public broker or something that's on your network, or?
So I have a broker right now that's running on, I have several brokers actually.
Okay.
And this particular one is hooked up to one of my ignition servers. So from inductive automation. And I did that only because everything else that I publish is in Spark B. And this is one of those, it does not get supported on MQT or MQTT. It's only flat. It does not support the Sparkplug B. So I also have just a little MQTT Explorer that I can use to read this data in here.
Right. Okay, great.
Yeah. So the way that you go in and work with it is then you, of course, have to define what are your subscription topics, what are you going to publish data out on, and let me minimize some of these. And what's interesting is that you cannot publish and subscribe at the exact same time. So if I want to publish a state, this has to be false, and then I can publish on true, and then it has to go back to false. Now, I didn't build in the program to make that happen, but ideally you would want to do a publish every so often so that if there were a state change, you could get that data out here. And that's exactly what is happening over here is what you're seeing. So on compressor 1, that's where it's publishing it. That's where this, that's where the value is coming from. It's compressor 1. Let me shrink this down a little bit just so you can see that. So you can see it's just going out to compressor 1. So that's what's coming over here. And then if I want to actually control it, then I can actually do that on compressor 1, and I call that control. That's what this start stop motor is.
Can you add more than one broker to the Siemens system?
I have not done it. I'm assuming that you can.
I saw that the EZRack PLC can support up to 4 brokers for redundancy, and so.
Yeah, it's a great question. I didn't explore this one too far, and it's not a dig at Siemens. I just didn't think that this was quite as ready for prime time, so I haven't spent a lot more time with it. It's really just, okay, can I do some things with it? And the answer is, yeah, I can do some basic things with it. I know others have gone through and they've created where it'll iterate through, and it's pretty involved. But the idea is that because it's just flat MQTT, that didn't fit in the technology stack that I want to look at.
That's true.
But again, there's some advantages to using the flat as well, and it's only because you don't have to worry about your group and node IDs that can sometimes wreak some havoc. It's been quite a conversation.
Yeah. And can you remind me, is the Siemens software, do you have to pay for that, or does that come with is that free?
So I ended up getting there's a cost for the license, but if you do one of their starter kits, which includes a PLC and a little handy dandy switch and the software, I think for about $400 you can get all of that in there. It's not bad. The PLC by itself, I think those are around $300, $275 somewhere there. So it's really not bad. Otherwise, to buy the software, it's like $400, and I think there's a few other things that are there as well. So, but they make it easy for you to get. A lot of PLC manufacturers have starter kits, so check them out. It's kind of a little pro tip as well.
Yeah, Penn College, I think we get a site license, and I think there's educational pricing. So it's just maybe $1,000 or $2,000 a year to maintain our Siemens license. So
sure.
But that's one of we use Allen Bradley and Siemens are our primary PLCs right now at the moment. But I think we're going to look very closely at the Opto22 now, and maybe some other ones, and the Phoenix Contact as well. So, yep.
So we're gonna just go ahead and start this manually. So we'll go get that. I always forget which way I'm supposed to get that turned. And naturally, now that we're in trying to do a demo here. Oh, I know, it's because I have some controlling going on. I have a program that's running, so it's not allowing me to do that. So what I can do here is I can actually now come over here and publish on my control. I can hit start motor.
So this is your remote control.
Yeah, so this is, I'm coming through MQTT Explorer. It's a way to see what's out there.
Yep.
And you can see now that it's set. So the way that I have my logic that's written down here in this block, you can see that if it's, if it's motor start, then it, changes these tags up, and if it's motor stopped. And so it's controlling this function up here. Right. So you'll notice that it does say motor running, but because this still says motor stopped, it's because I'm not able to update. So what I can do is come in here and set this to false and set this to true. And now it's going to publish out that motor is running. So I have to set that back to false.
Now, have you tried using HiveMQ or something so that somebody like myself could actually start your motor?
So it's absolutely, I could set this up to where you could remotely start and stop it based on it. That's the nice thing about MQTT is that as long as somebody has access to the broker and they know how to manipulate it, then yes, you absolutely could. Now, again, my example here is that I'm starting and stopping a motor. Would you really want to do that in real time, or do that to have remote access to it? No, of course not. That's bad engineering design. But the idea is that, yeah, I do have control capability to do that as
well. And of course, you showed me the, turning on a secure connection with password and username is probably a little bit better than just using the public free broker like I mentioned, which is probably smart. We don't want the Russians messing with our projects, do we?
Yeah, exactly. So you can see I can, turn it on and off, and and it's not a real sexy demo, but it just demonstrates how it works.
Yeah.
And of course, then coming over into ignition, I did create a tag that says, okay, it's stopped the motor and the motor is stopped type of thing. So if I want to come in here and put in start motor, and publish that out, you can see now it's started the motor. And then coming back here, I can just publish that tag out real fast. And now you can see that, now it's motors running. So
now,
it's the last function that came through.
Yeah. So can you control the motor in ignition as well? Are you able to write back to your tag, in other words?
Not through ignition, because I only publish out on Sparkplug B. So right now, all I can do is see it, and you can see I just have a nice little, little indicator. So now I can hit stop motor, hit publish, and you'll notice that the light ideally is going to change back to red. Now, so you understand what's happening under the hood. This logic is all being driven by, so my Siemens, I also have it connected up to an Ignition Edge instance that's running on a Raspberry Pi, and then it's also publishing out to this other namespace, which is why you're able to see this in here. So these aren't actually running off of these tags right here. They're running off of a different set of tags. But
yeah, the reason I bring that up is I know in the designer, Ignition Designer, there's a way you can actually enable write back to a tag. I don't know if you've played with that, but it's the default is that you cannot write back to your tag. But there's something in the settings tools maybe that, and I didn't know if that was if you played with that at all to see.
I have not.
Yeah,
I have not, and it's only because with Sparkplug B, it's so much easier. It's out of the box functionality, and it connects in with so many other things.
Yeah, I was going to ask too about Sparkplug B. There's also something about the tag browser where flat MQTT shows up in one spot and Sparkplug B shows up in another, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can you explain a little bit why that is, or is that just a feature of Ignition that you have to get used to?
No, that's a feature of Sparkplug B.
Sparkplug
so when you start getting into the specification, you'll notice that here is the IP address of that the Ignition server that I'm looking on. That's what this is right here.
Right. Okay.
And you can see that now I have the namespace, and I guess when I was first getting this set up, I have some errant tags that are sitting up here. So let's get rid of those. So now you can see this is the exact namespace that we've been working with here. Motor running. Here's the motor control tag that I can write to. Those types of things. So notice here, there's this SpB v1. So this is Sparkplug B version 1. And when you get into the specification, that's the very first leading tag you're always going to have. And so if you support Sparkplug B, the very first thing is going to say, I'm a Sparkplug B tag. And then after that, you're going to get into your group ID. Now you're going to get into your device ID, and you're also going to have a node ID. So all these debirth, inbirth, dedeath, enddeath, this all relates to some of the actual topics that are part of the specification.
Right.
So all your data is coming through D data. So it's actually Aaron City is how the Siemens is hooked up. So my Ignition Edge device, it's using a group of G5, and then its device is Aaron City. So that's that area that I use the enterprise site for all of that. And then after that, you're going to be into all of your N data and D data information.
Okay, great. And of course, like you said, Siemens is flat MQTT, so we're not looking at the Siemens data at this point. That's up above, right? Or
this is all the stuff that's coming right from the Siemens MQTT, and then that's what this information here is as well. Because Ignition does have the ability to bring in flat MQTT, it just doesn't publish back out. And as you mentioned, there are some settings. It sounds like you can adjust. I've not gone into that, so
okay, yeah.
And it's only because with Spark B, it makes it so much easier just to do it right out of the box.
And another, Walker talks a lot about the fact that when you're doing MQTT, you only need one like outgoing port. So it's the security is much better, right? 8883 or 1883. But once you have that set up, you can actually write back, the other way, even though you're sort of going back in. But once you, as I understand it correctly, once you have that, you establish the communication, you can actually communicate back the other way. But the designer, you have to enable the ability to write tag, I just thought that was interesting, I'm thinking the IT people, how they're so concerned about security, but it's not really a limitation for us just to have that one, outgoing port, because we can still communicate back in, I guess is what but I haven't played with it.
Yeah, so it's an outbound connection. So from all of the hardware, it's all outbound to the broker. Now you do have to have the broker has to be accessible through that port if you want anything else to do it. So if you have a plant broker, chances are it's going to sit on your plant, and then it's going to do a bridge connection into an enterprise. So that bridge is going to be an outbound only connection as well. But you can still get back in, and it's only because it creates a persistent connection, but it's all the way secured in there as well. So it's much like when you're browsing or web browsing and you're on a secure connection. So when you see the lock up there using SSL, it would be very challenging to make any changes. And that gets brought up because that's one of the fundamental differences between a lot of the technology or the way that you get things to communicate. We've talked a lot about OPC. That has to have an inbound port that is now open for those devices to come back in, which is why you end up talking a lot about the DMZ and the Purdue security model, because you do have to make sure that your control layer is locked down, that if anything is coming in, you want to make sure that they're not accessing have the ability to access your controls. And with Spark B, it removes it because it's an outbound only port. You're connected outbound, and if you don't like something, you just immediately disconnect, and now they have no access to it whatsoever.
Yep, great. So, yep, super. Thanks for explaining that. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is how you do MQTT with the Siemens S7 platform. Like I said, it's function blocks. You gotta put in and do some programming on your data blocks, and then you also have to do some structured text to actually read and write the tags to actually do your control with it as well.
Yep.
So the next one.
I was just going to have a question. Have you seen the Siemens IOT Gateway? We ended up buying a couple before the semester ended last spring, and I haven't had a chance to play with it, but apparently it's like a Raspberry Pi based unit that takes, I'm assuming, OPC UA and other protocols and converts to MQTT, but I haven't looked to see whether it was Sparkplug B or not, but probably would be, but
that I don't know.
Yeah, and it was fairly inexpensive, like $300, So maybe if I was going to try to get that, look into that, maybe that'd be a video we could look into is looking at that IoT gateway, if that's looks like a good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's take a look at some stuff that's out there. I mean, this is all about how can we architect, how do we digitally transform? And I'm not so beholden to Spark B that it's like, yeah, that's the absolute, you have to have that. But there are some things about it that make it pretty nice to use, especially with an automation standpoint. I mean, it's really what it was geared for, is moving data around within an automation context. So the next one we're going to take a look at is Omron. So what I'm using is this is a Maple Systems. So they do make a gateway that's going to be very similar to a lot of the IoT gateways that are out there. You can see this is more of an HMI rendition of what's there. So coming into the Omron code itself, this is in their CX, or how you go about in the CX1 software. This is how you go in, and this is your development environment for the Omron PLC. So I have a CJ2M that's running back there. You're going to see it's the exact same type of setup in terms of what it is we're doing, local remote control and the like. So I can now come over here into my Maple Systems. Now, again, this is one of their SVRs. This is their server that has the HMI capability to it. They also make a gateway that has all the drivers here. And when you take a look at all the number of drivers that exist within Maple Systems, there's a ton of them.
Wow.
And there's some 200 drivers that you can connect to in just about anything that's out there. So I really like it. And for a price point, I think they're around $500, and that's on the high end. you can actually get this type of capability where now you can take tags that are sitting on this Omron or any of those 200 drivers out there, and you can now publish them out to Sparkplug B.
Wow.
So what you have to do is go over to their IoT, and they call it energy. And they have a little MQTT. This is the controller. So now coming in here, this is the general, what are we going to set up? So now we're using the, this is the name of the broker that we're coming into. Again, it's got that same username, password, cloud services. What are we using here? And of course, you can use SparkBlee, flat. There's a number of drivers that will connect right to. So you get all that set up. You can now come in here and set up your group and your edge node. This is going to Aaron City. And then you come in here to your device. And now all of those tags that you have sitting on that Omron PLC, I've now brought in. Now I call my PLC back here in my configuration. Let's go back to that real fast, just so you understand where some of the stuff comes from. You'll notice that I call the name of this thing is called production. And that's what's now going to become your node ID. Your device ID coming off of that. So going back over here into the IoT, going back into the security. So here you have your group, you have your node. Now you're going to get into your device, and it's going to be called whatever that device is. So I've now set up another folder called line 1, so I can take advantage of the ISA 95, where we're going enterprise site area line cell. And I'm just saying, this is, again, we're going to be controlling a line with this particular device. So it has all the same tag names, so it gets to be, so there's just consistency and know everything that we're looking at. And that's really all there is to it in terms of getting that all set. Of course, then you have to come into the project. You do have to download that to your HMI. You can put it into simulation mode, so very similar, but it does support SparkB for that simulation mode as well. So I can come in here and I can actually do that, or I can actually go over here to Ignition, because now pushed out on the Aaron City. So this is all coming in, here's the production, here's line 1. You can now see all those tags. So we can come over here and I can do all the same type of thing. I want to let's put this in preview mode. So I can now stop it and come over here to the, you can see that this is now stopped. It's not running. I can go back over here into start it, and you can now see all those tags come in. And this occurs pretty quickly. So I can do that as well.
Great,
so
great.
That's a pretty easy way to.
Excuse me 1 second. I gotta turn off an alarm. In the oven, I had to turn off the oven. So.
Yeah, no, I get it. Well, hey, when it gets to be dinner time, it's time to eat. So, we were talking a little bit earlier about the easy logic. I don't know if you had any questions on that Maple Systems.
Well, let's go back. Let's talk about cost. Does that have like a sort of a beginner starter kit pricing? Around $500.
Yeah, but they're so inexpensive right out of the box that you don't even really need one. It's just so powerful for what it does. Like I said, the SVR itself, so that's the one that does the HMI. That's what I have. It gives you, has 2 Ethernet on it, so you can have both your sort of your business side and your controls side. Your controls LAN, as it's referred to. You can control both of those as well. I don't have this set up that way.
Well, if you had a client that this would make sense for, would they have to have an annual subscription for the software priced in? No,
software is free.
Oh, software is free from Maple Systems. Okay, that's
and they have phenomenal support. I've had to call and get questions, and they're very responsive.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I don't know how they're making any money, but they seem to. I mean, no, they're really inexpensive, very powerful. There's a lot of things that Maple Systems do, especially the price point.
Yeah, I know Walker speaks of that highly when he goes over the typical, things that he chooses from, and Maple Systems is always on the list for sure.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole idea is that all this technology needs to both, publish and subscribe, or it needs to, produce and consume information, and that fits in the technology stack because it supports the technologies that we want to support. Now, in this particular case, I'm using a driver from Maple Systems to actually connect to the PLC, but there's no reason why I couldn't bring in data the other way as well and do that control. Typically, I will have, an OPC UA or some native driver that's coming right out of my SCADA package or my HMI that I'm not going to use to control that control layer, and then publish that data out over Sparkplug B. That to me is just a better way to go about it, unless there's another reason to do it for that reason. So, Coming into the EZRack, again, you can see the exact same type of scenario. We got a local and remote control. You can turn the motor on and off. When you go in to set up your Sparkplug B, and again, Easy will do both flat and MQTT. So now here we're going to come out. Here's our group, our node, and our device IDs that we can publish in here. So this is going to be at the Greenville location. Here's the broker that I'm now going to define. So again, it's going to the same IP address as my that's on that ignition server, giving it all the same username, password. And then when I want to publish some tags, so these are all the tags that you have to go in and set up. I've actually gone through. So here's my my group and my node and my device IDs. I can also create another layer in here to keep with the ISA 95. And then all I have to do is any of the tags that I have sitting over here, that's just a drag and drop. So where it's different from the Maple systems coming in here is that when I set up all of these tags in here, that's not where I did it, over here in device, I actually had to define each one of these one at a time. So I call it something and then I give it an address. So I have to go back through. I had to do the same thing with the ignition edge and those Siemens tags. But what's slick about this, the EZRack is that now I just have to take all the tags that I want and I just literally drag them over to where I want to publish them. And now they're all publishing available to any other system that can consume the Sparkplug B information.
Yeah. Hey, David, there was a tag there that had client ID you could randomly generate or something like that. Is there a best practice for the client? The client ID?
So this is just a unique ID, and you've probably noticed on some of the other, you got out there. I'm not connected to it right now, but you'll see a whole bunch of these device IDs. Oftentimes that's used for what's my state if you're taking advantage of the primary ID. So that'll tell me that this client ID now is going to line up with the primary ID of some device, and so you know what's connected.
I just wondering if you shouldn't have something more descriptive, make something that makes sense, or do you typically use the random sequence?
I just generate it.
Okay.
It just creates a very, again, it's designed to be a unique ID or a client ID. It's more around that primary application that you want to take advantage of. But you can call it, if you wanted to, you could call it EZRack 1, and then anything else, like a canary is stored, you can call it canary hist or whatever you want to have. I just tend to use the unique IDs just so it's a string that's going to be unique to whatever it is. I don't need to worry about somebody else calling theirs canary hist and coming up. So, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
That's what you see there. So yeah, going into the Spark B, I think that's pretty much all there is to it. And again, you can just come over here to it. Let's get this into
and of course, I played with this, so I do know that's free. The support and the software is free, so that's pretty amazing. I watched the interview with that Walker did with the CEO of Easy Automation, and interesting business case. He just basically, I guess they don't spend a lot of money on marketing, but somehow the business case, of course, they're into a lot of other things besides PLCs, but somehow they figured out how they could offer this for free and still make money. So, it's great.
All right. So now you can see we're into the mode. So now we'll just come over here and control it. So again, with that, I can just hit start. And of course, now it magically starts. So apparently something got missed in here. It wasn't connected the way it should have been. So it always seems to happen this way. So it should be running. Oh, I don't have this remote switch set to on. Now it should be good to go. So now you can go ahead and start it. Come back over here to got too many applications running. Now you can see that it did its seal in. So that's just a temporary button. And it'll just runs through. This is the actual logic once you get that running through. And you can come back over and you can hit stop, and now you know that it's stopped. So come back over, and pretty cheesy for what it does, but it tells you an idea. Now, as we talked about, this is controlling over Sparkplug B. So the connection that I have here, this is all connected to a broker. I'm now sending out, there's a command that you can't see. Let's go back over here to the broker. You'll notice there's now also these commands that show up. And now you can see that there's commands that are going back and forth. So this is all part of that Sparkplug B specification, that you'll have data and you'll have node commands. You'll also have device commands that are coming back over. Just depends on what's working. But that fundamentally, and it shows you, in fact, if I minimize this and brought it over a little bit short, there was a video I did earlier that just demonstrated how fast Sparkplug B is. So there was a connection where I was actually bridging to some brokers.
Yeah, actually, the other day I was looking for your channel. Is that easy? For some reason, it's not easy to find on YouTube. I must not have subscribed. So can you share what your YouTube channel would be?
Yeah, it should. It's just G5 Consulting. Just look for that. There's two of us out there, but I'm the one that has more subscribers. So for what it's worth.
Get my swag pack notebook here.
Yeah, right. So, you get a sense for how fast all this occurs.
Yeah, I wanted to look at more of your videos. I think I only watched just one recently. So
yeah, no, there was one that was that we were publishing tank data, and then it was going all the way up to a cloud broker, and we did did all the hops that went through there and did a trace route on it. There are some 200 different 20 connections that we're making back, and it was showing up pretty quickly in real time. So Sparkplug B, along with being lightweight, secure, it's also exceptionally fast.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to dive into more of your content. I don't know if you've been able to keep up maybe more than me, but there's a tremendous amount of content through the Discord server and so on and so forth. And but yeah, looks like you have some fantastic contact. And you mentioned, did you say Wireshark you were using to trace?
It was just trace route. I use a lot of Linux and trace routes, just some functions that you can use in there, pings and telnets and those types of things, just to get a sense, okay, am I able to see it? Just some troubleshooting tools.
Have you used Wireshark for anything? It's
I have not.
A protocol analyzer. It might be something maybe I'll get into, because I did notice we use it for some networking classes that I do. Do some to look to see how the packets are flowing, through the network and frames actually. And I did notice there was an MQTT filter on there. So it does everything, on the OSI model, all the layers. So that might be something that might be good to, maybe as a future video we can look into that, how that could be a tool.
I haven't done much with it because a lot of my work is more around architecting. So I'll set up VMs, more like SQL, those types of things, and then just actually getting in SCADA and MES type functionality. So there's only so many things you can learn in a day. So I focus on those things that are going to provide the value there. So so this is getting into the Opto22. So this is off of their Groov Epic. And again, you just go in and define all your tags that you have in here. And coming back to your MQTT, there's a whole section there as well. So you just go into your configuration, and there's two different ways that you can get data out. So one of them is through the controller. And so what the controller's doing is, if we come back here, you saw there's this controller, you can run a pack control. So there is some programming that you can come in and actually create. This is the development environment for Opto22. And the cool thing about logic is you took a look at those at the ladder logic that we had in those other systems. Well, if you come in and actually did that using some Opto script, this is all you're doing, is you're literally setting that logic up. It's like, if not motor 1, then set your stop relay and your stop PL. So there's two different devices I'm hooked up to. There's a Rio that I'm using as well. So there's a couple of relays that are built into it. So I'm actually controlling both. It's nice to have remote I/O, because if you run out of space on your PLC cards, you can just pick up a nice little remote I/O device, and that fits well into this overall architecture. So that's all I'm doing is solving all those logic statements. It's literally how you build your ladder logic, is writing all this stuff out. So it's pretty slick to work with that way.
Yeah, I like it. And of course, it's browser-based control here. That's kind of interesting. So no software to install, right?
Well, so this is their programming, and it's, I think, up to 100 different I/O points. You can use the free, and then there is a license that comes with it. It's not as expensive what is it? I think the Omron was like $1,500. It was not insignificant for that. And once that's all set up, again, you can come in and do your configuration. And now all you have to do, and I'm just going to take a look at how the, I'm sorry, I have to go back to IO. So once you get all this set up in here, I'm just going to take a look at the IO itself rather than working with all of the stuff that comes off. But really, when I go in and set my eStop up, all I have to do is hit configure. Do I want to have public access to that tag? I just slide it to yes, and now it's all available via the broker itself. So, you know, that's how the Opto22. So again, you have function blocks. You have what you have to do it, you know, one tag at a time with the Maple systems. The EZLogic makes it pretty easy. It's just merely a drag and drop. Here, it's a part of, do I want this tag available publicly? And you just set that up when you're setting up your tag itself. Once all that's done, then you just have to come in your MQTT, get your configuration also taken care of, and you're off and running. And it does bring back two different, you know, it does give you the option of having just your local. So this is on the actual IO itself, which is what that Opto MMP is working with. And then on the controller, you can give it a device ID as well. And probably notice back here on the controllers, you can do code assist as well. So within this one platform, you can actually publish out tags from a lot of different devices as well. You're not limited to just what's occurring within the Opto ecosystem. As long as it supports code assist and you can bring those tags back in, you can absolutely publish those out as well. So kind of gives you some flavor of all the various ways that you can get PLCs and setting up MQTT and Sparkplug B across there. But you can see that's, again, there's a lot of different ways of doing it, and some are a little bit easier than others. But that's kind of give you a flair for what's there.
As far as the your brokers, like I'm thinking back in my situation, we have multiple departments that I can see. You know, we have PLCs in about 3 different areas, in plastics and electrical and electronics. Is maybe setting up a namespace that they can all publish to, which would make sense. Instead of having a local one, maybe having a cloud-based broker like HiveMQ or something. But
yeah.
I'm just thinking would you suggest the same thing, is maybe get something like that set up?
It's really a function of what you're trying to do with it. I will have, sometimes there's going to be a line area broker. And so the way that I get around, or the way that I work with that, is that you can see here on the MQTT engine, there's a lot of different brokers that you can hook up to. Let's go back into the actual configuration. So when you're getting into your engine settings, you can set up a lot of different servers that you want to connect to. And so what I'll take a look at doing is actually having multiple servers that could be within a plant, multiple brokers that I can now bring back in. And then I'm going to have an IoT platform like Ignition or Factory Studio that will then take care, own all of that information. And then I can publish all of that back out. So I'll take every one of these, but when I get into my transmitter and I'm actually publishing all that information out, that's going to occur on its own broker itself. And this is what I might have hooked up to an enterprise. So, can you hook everything up to one cloud broker or even a local broker? Yep, sure can. Do you want to have multiple brokers across a plant? So it makes sense to have brokers that sit there, because, one of the challenges you're going to run into is, again, you're limited to that group and that node ID. And that's what everything is going to have to be called. So if you're into, say, even like multiple lines, and you want to call something, line 1, line 2, well, you're not going to be able to do that. So if you do have, say, like an area level where I'm now going to have, okay, I'm now in this particular area and I'm now line 1 and I'm line 2, now you can take advantage of Sparkplug. You'll have an area broker that then comes into your IoT platform, and then you can then take that information, put it all together, and then publish out that overall robust unified namespace that fits with a enterprise site. So this would become a site broker.
Yeah, it was sort of meaningful when I realized, you could have multiple brokers. Early when I learned about MQTT, I've always thought that you only could have one broker, but in reality, you probably definitely want to have, multiple brokers set up locally and then maybe in the cloud. And it's amazing.
Yeah, and with flat, you can take advantage of what's known as a bridge. So I can have a local that now bridges all those tags over. And that works great for for flat MQTT, because you can prepend all of that. So if you have your area MQTT structure, you can prepend that up and go to your site. But you can't do that with Spark B, because it's the group and that node ID that then dictate everything that's there. So all you're going to end up with is it'll prepend it, but you're still going to have that Spark B V1 that sits there, in the middle of that space, and that's exactly how it's going to ignore everything that's in front.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways of doing it, and of course, Matthew Paris talks about how we're now going to have enterprise site area. There's now going to be this, enterprise site area that now is going to be that group ID, and then line and will become your node ID, then your devices that exist there. So that's another way of taking advantage of it. But to me at this point, that becomes more like when we used to do, if you were limited to 8 bits on like Windows 95 file structures, now you're coming up with some really goofy, like, I'm going to have, G5 and AR, and, what if I'm in Arkansas and, something else, how do you take advantage of that and make sure you can delineate it? Because, yes, you can add it. There's a limit to how many character the string character can be, but every character takes up resources.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Sure. Yeah.
It's 60. It's a horse apiece, as they say here in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Okay, Wisconsin. I didn't find out where you were from. So Wisconsin, great.
Yeah.
So
eat a lot of cheese here. So.
Yeah. Great.
Anyway, I don't know if you had any other questions on that, but that was really the gist of what we were trying to do.
I think that's fantastic. I think it'd be good to kind of keep it short, wrap it up, and I appreciate your time, David. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, and thank you so much. I appreciate the question, because it was let's go out and get some stuff answered. So, well, again, it's great seeing you, Jeff. Thank you a lot for your time.
Okay, we'll be in touch.
Yeah, hang on. Get this.